Story 1. Advice needed. Crazy neighbors making it impossible for my sister to spend any time in her backyard. My sister and my brother-in-law have 2 children ages 5 and 3, a senior small dog, and a young relaxed bulldog. She is directly next to a couple who are in their 40s, no children, 2 large aggressive dogs. These neighbors have made it nearly impossible for her and her family to spend any time outside with their dogs and children. First, they play loud music, terrible music taste during the week, late at night 10 p.m. onward, and almost every weekend. They have no regard for the fact that they have young kids living right next door / do not turn the music down in the evening when the kids are going to bed. If her kids make loud noises outside while playing like most kids do, then they turn the music up to insane volumes. They have not tried to have any friendly relationship with my sister and her family since they moved in, and have not spoken a word to them in the 2 years my sister and her family have lived there. Both my sister and her family and said neighbors own their homes. Second, and most importantly, the neighbors and my sister her fam share a fence line. It is a privacy fence, so it's tall enough where you can't really see through it, but there are still small open spaces between the fence boards. My sister's dogs are very quiet and well behaved, and rarely if at all bark or cause trouble in the backyard. Her young bulldog sometimes sniffs along the fence line. Almost every time the bulldog gets near the fence, the neighbors' dogs go crazy and start barking and growling. To try to deal with this, the neighbors from hell scream at my sister's dog to get off the fence, have sprayed her dog with a hose through the fence, and also bang loudly on the fence anytime her dog gets near it. My sister and her family are at a loss as to what to do. She is considering going to have a conversation with them about this to figure out how both of them can live civilly next to each other, but with the way the neighbors have acted, she is unsure of how this will go over. If anyone has any advice, please share, as it would be greatly appreciated. Story 2. Friday night here in the country can get a little crazy, sometimes, so I don't mind when my neighbors cause a ruckus or loud party as long as it's not too crazy. Tonight I'm on call for Virginia State Police towing rotation, which means I've got 25 minutes to get to wherever the wreck / Dewey / impound / etc. is. As luck would have it, my neighbors are having a party, and guess what's blocking my driveway? That's right, about 25-30 cars. I live down a dirt road at the end of a cul-de-sac, and it's pretty narrow, one in one out type of deal, and with this rain we've been having, parking in the grass / clay / mud is really not the best idea. Even with a 4x4 it can still get tricky. I noticed a few cars coming in early this evening and walked over to my neighbors and made it pretty clear I was on call, and as long as they didn't block the road or my driveway, all would be good. No problems here. Well, I get a call from my boss asking if I can go warm up the rotator and the light-duty flatbed tow trucks. It's about 12:30 am, so I get my boots on and other gear, because if I'm up I might as well stay at the shop and clean a few things to stay busy and make the night move along. I get in my car, and as I'm backing out of the driveway I notice I'm blocked in. I don't mean by one truck, but by nearly 15 different vehicles. I calmly walk over to my neighbors, about a 1/8 mile hike, and as I'm looking for them through the crowd of drunk teenagers, some idiot wants to know why I'm on his property. He's not the property owner. I've never seen this classy gentleman. Finally, I find my neighbor and ask her if she can move the cars. I've got to go to work. She says in a normal tone, doesn't yell over the music into the house, "Whoever's blocking the driveway next door, move your trucks," then slams the door in my face. I knock again, and she answers with a drunken, "Oh God, this witch again?" Internally I'm thinking, all right, then I do my best to explain. I'm on call and need to get out of my driveway to go to work. She comes back sloshing a natural light, exclaiming it's a party, relax, shuts the door in my face and yells, "Get lost, you weirdo." I smile, and as I'm walking away, Macho Man throws a beer at me and cackles, "Yeah, you best leave, go on." I get on the phone with dispatch and call for as many trucks as we have available tonight, about 10, and tell them to come on over. Mama's got some PPS private property impounds. I call police dispatch and ask if they'd send out an officer in case things get out of hand, and as soon as he gets to my place, My rigs start rolling up and hooking vehicles up and taking them to the impound yard. We get down to the last 3 vehicles: a yellow Civic, gold Silverado, and an old F-150. The Civic owner bolts to his car and takes off. The Silverado girl, pretty wasted, gets stuck and starts tearing up my property. Officer walks over and she throws a fit. Long story short, and she gets arrested for underage drinking and Dewey. The Ford owner doesn't show up. I got to work after all the impounds, and with me I brought coffees and snacks for my drivers. Tomorrow's not a business day, which means if these tools want their cars back, it's going to be the regular $289.50 plus 2 days of storage at $55 a day and a $100 gate fee. I make a note in every single storage sheet papers that the vehicle owners get to thank the girl who had the party for getting towed. Several of the kids' parents called wanting to know where their cars or trucks were. I gave them the yard address and told them they can come anytime. As soon as they started shouting about illegal tows and threatened with lawyers, I showed them pictures of their cars with no parking signs, and explained that I tried to reason with the owner of the property, but she was tired of being blocked in by drunken teenagers. There are signs on my road saying no parking and not to block the driveway. Don't piss off a tow truck driver, she'll legally take your vehicles. Edit. The gate fee is only for after hours. It covers expenses of overtime for the office staff who have to get out of bed and come to work in the middle of the night. Also, how do I sleep at night? With a glass of chocolate milk while reading Ask Reddit. Story 3. Before I start the story, I'll tell you that the rabbit in this story was extremely tame. She was kicked out of the nest, so I had to bottle feed her a couple weeks. Loyal, and she listened to me like a dog. This made it so that I would be able to walk with her in public and even forests without her fleeing from me. She always had on a harness when I walked with her, and I had a leash. Now on to the story. So I was walking with my rabbit to the veterinarian to get her bi-yearly anti-coccidia shot, because she had gotten it at a young age, and it was the best way to prevent a secondary infection of it. I was not even 5 minutes away from the veterinarian when it happened. A mom and her kid walked by. The kid suddenly tried to pick up my rabbit. She only allowed me to do it. Not everyone else who tried succeeded. She luckily got away from the kid and ran toward me and started stomping. The entitled mother walked up to me and said, "Thank you for stopping my kid's rabbit." I was absolutely dumbfounded by what she said, and I instantly picked my rabbit up and put the leash on her harness, just in case. "Excuse me, his rabbit?" Her. "Yes, his rabbit. Now hand him over." "Wait, what gender did you say it is?" "My rabbit is female." "A boy." "Now hand him over before I call the cops." Having chipped my rabbit in case this exact thing happened, I tell her, "So I can tell you won't leave me alone. Let's head to the veterinarian to check if she is chipped, then we know who her owner is." "It's an he, and I don't accept this. Just hand him over or I'll call the cops." "The cops will tell you the exact same thing I just did if I tell them she is chipped. We will also go to the veterinarian to check." I start walking to the veterinarian office with my rabbit held tightly to my body. The mother and the kid followed me. At the veterinarian's clinic, I checked my rabbit in for her appointment and didn't have to wait a second because of the delay I got dealing with these entitled mother and kid. The vet asked me why I brought them. I can't even start my sentence because she yells, "It is not his rabbit, it's my son's." The vet, "Oh, I see. I will get the chip reader to check the legal owner." The rabbit's chip is controlled and the vet asks for all of our IDs and surprise, surprise, I come out as the legal owner. The mother and her kid angrily walk out the clinic and I and the vet start the appointment. I was about to leave when a couple of cops and someone from the wildlife ambulance walked in with the mother and the kid. "Cop #1, we got a report of a stolen rabbit." The vet instantly says this is a false report, that we already read the chip and found the person who is the legal owner. The wildlife ambulance man then says that is why I am here. "It's good you say you already checked the chip, so I will do the same from a neutral position." I and the vet instantly accepted this and let him check, but the mother intervened. The wildlife ambulance man says, "Ma'am, if you don't let me do my job, you will be charged with struggling against procedure." Her. But in the time it took for you to come, they could have implanted a chip for this reason. Ma'am, it takes 1 hour to implant and put in the correct data for that let me do my job. The chip and everyone's ID gets checked, and guess what happened? I was found to be the legal owner. I got asked to press charges, which I happily did, and got a compensation that was almost enough for the appointment. The end. Story 4. For context, I 16-year-old female have been hurt by my mother for most of my life, both physically and emotionally. Most of the time, I just take it. I don't fight back. I take it, follow the instructions I'm given afterward, and I do my best not to cry. She's my mom, right? So I should do what she says. And if I mess up, it's not like she wants to hurt me, but I just keep making her. Or at least, that's been my perspective for much of my life. It didn't really change until a few years ago. At first, it was over little things. I would occasionally talk back when she tried to guilt-trip me for not caring about her enough. I have to keep my face impassive whenever I talk to her in a confrontational manner, because otherwise, I start crying uncontrollably, and then she says she hopes I feel more pain. She'll ask, "Does it hurt?" Good. Or it would be over forgetting to do the dishes, or undermining her, like when I once asked her to double-check if something was on sale. Just stuff like that. Next, it was not walking over to her so she could hit me. She did this thing where, if I went too far, like talking back because she misunderstood the situation or my intentions, she would tell me to come stand in front of her so she could give me a slap across the face, or push me around, or just rough me up a little. Total power play. She'd ask me to shuffle forward, get into position, and then she'd say she didn't want to do it, blah blah blah. If you don't like hurting kids, guess what? It's actually that easy, just don't hurt them. Before I get to the main part of this story, which is truly something else, I do have to admit that I am not entirely blameless in all of this. I have talked back just for the sake of it. I've said things to be hurtful in the heat of the moment, and I've done things that deserve consequences. I totally agree, sometimes I'm a silly kid, and I do silly things. I'm not disputing that. That being said, there's a better way to deal with sleeping in than dragging your child out of bed at 6:40 a.m. by the hair and slamming their face into a wall. There's a better way to handle your kid not standing up to bullies than backing your 9-year-old into a corner, hitting her, telling her to fight back, and then when she falls, kicking her until her torso is bruised the next day. There's a better way to respond to your child not doing the dishes than stomping on her feet and shoving her aside to get to what you need. There are other ways. It's never okay to hit kids. I actually don't care how misbehaved a kid has been, you still shouldn't do it. And here's where the main conflict begins. It's kind of absurd, honestly. A few months ago, my mom went out on a Friday night to go. I don't really know. She doesn't share much with me, and that night she was especially upset with me. For what? I didn't know. If I had to guess, it was probably just general resentment that had been building up. Anyway, she goes out, asks me to do the dishes while she's gone, and I actually do them. Usually, I forget because I get distracted or pulled into something else, but that night I was determined to finish. Well, determined is the wrong word. I mostly just wanted to finish so I could get back to reading. My downfall came when, with only one stack of plates left to put away, my dad came into the kitchen and asked if I wanted to get takeaway from a fast food place for dinner. Being the absolute scatterbrain I am, all thoughts of the plates vanished at the mention of takeaway. We went out, got the food, and then I suggested we eat on the couch. Dad agreed. We sat on the couch for the rest of the night, watched a movie, and then went to bed. Morning came. I heard my mother walking around the kitchen, so I got up to go out into the dining kitchen area, intending to say good morning. Yelling ensued. The dialogue went a bit like this. Mom, my name. Me, good morning to you too. Understandably, I was not in the best mood after being yelled at first thing in the morning. Mom, what is this? Far too loud. Really, for 8 a.m. Me, I dunno. Mood officially soured. Mum, I asked you to do the dishes last night and you didn't. Me. Yeah, I did. Mum. Then why is there a stack of plates here? Me. Oh, my bad. Please note that when I say my bad, I mean it in the most literal sense. It's my way of taking responsibility without actually apologizing. Since my mother has warned me repeatedly not to apologize, she hates it when I do, saying it's lazy and not worth the oxygen it takes up. So I try not to apologize unless I think it will actually diffuse the situation, and in this case, I didn't think it would. Anyway, I started walking off to the bathroom because my mom was still in the kitchen, thinking I could put the plates away after she moved to the table for breakfast. She charged toward me, and in the moment before she reached me, I had to make a choice. Anyway, a few months have gone by, and honestly, it's been strange. After everything happened, I went back to school and started trying to settle into some kind of normal again. I've been keeping in touch with my friends, and they've been nothing short of amazing. I don't know how I'd be coping without them. They've supported me, reminded me that none of what happened was my fault, and kept me grounded on the days when I start doubting myself. But still, things haven't exactly gone back to normal. My mom and I are supposed to be doing conflict resolution counseling. It's a bit awkward, to say the least. The sessions are mostly quiet, or filled with her talking about how hard things have been for her since everything happened. There are apologies now and then, and I try to accept them for what they are. But I can't pretend it doesn't sting a little when she shifts the blame again. She says things like, "You know I only ever wanted to help you grow," or, "It's because I love you that I was so strict." But love shouldn't feel like fear. It shouldn't leave bruises. It shouldn't make you dread going home. What really bothers me, though, is how she talks about her night in jail. She refers to it as if she went through something deeply traumatic, like she was a victim of some great injustice. She'll say things like, "You'll never understand what it's like to be locked in a room with no freedom." And I want to scream because I lived that every day in my own home. She tells me the system is biased, that the teacher who reported her ruined our family. She said she hopes something similar happens to that teacher so she can understand the pain she caused. That one hurt a lot, because that teacher might have just saved me. My father has been trying his best. We're not super close, but he's stepped up a bit more since I came back. He's not perfect, but he doesn't yell or hit, and that's enough for now. He listens, even if he doesn't always know what to say. I think he's still struggling with everything that happened too. He didn't know the full extent of what was going on. Maybe he didn't want to know. I can't blame him too much. Denial is easier sometimes. But now he's here, and that matters. My mother's next court date is in a few weeks. I don't know what will happen. Part of me wants to hope for some real change, some kind of accountability or realization that might make her treat people better. Another part of me is just tired. I've had to grow up too fast, and I'm still only 16. I should be thinking about school, or hobbies, or whatever teenagers are supposed to worry about. Instead, I'm thinking about court orders, supervised visits, and whether I'm doing the right thing by keeping my distance. She keeps telling me to call her. I do it every other day, like she asked. Sometimes she's nice. Other times she's cold. It's like walking on eggshells again, but over the phone now. I don't know if it's worth it. I want to forgive her. I really do. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean letting someone hurt you again. So yeah, that's where things stand right now. I'm trying to focus on healing. I'm seeing a counselor, and I'm slowly opening up more. I'm trying to learn that it's okay to cry, that being vulnerable doesn't make me weak, and that I deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. It's not easy, but it's a start. Thanks again to anyone who actually read all of this. I know it's a lot, and some parts are pretty heavy. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I'll answer them when I can. And for anyone who's going through something similar, please know that you're not alone. There is help out there, and you don't have to suffer in silence. Story 5. When I started dating Hank, I learned about his living situation. He was set to be a partial owner of a home with his father, Donald. For your information, Donald wasn't a great guy either. He was in his 80s and had grown up with a violent, nightmarish father himself. To begin with, Donald was a misogynist, a bigot, and he absolutely loved pointing out that a lack of a Doctor of Philosophy degree meant you had no value. Donald and Kevin lived together on a separate level of the home. Donald had taken Kevin on as a disabled dependent around 2005. Hank explained that Donald had promised his late wife not to let Kevin end up on the street. When my relationship with Hank progressed, we discussed living together, and we both understood the complications that would come with living alongside Kevin. But Kevin was nearly non-negotiable. He came with the package. The home had even been purchased solely for the purpose of housing Kevin after Donald passed away. Hank and Donald both knew that if Hank didn't move in and establish some sort of routine with Kevin before Donald died, it would create a nightmare scenario. Imagine an aggressive 55-year-old man with the emotional maturity of a preteen suddenly being ruled by his brother. So my choice was this. Either I didn't live with Hank at all, or I lived in the chaos. I chose to live with my partner. Hank knew I wasn't thrilled with the situation because I had grown up with extreme emotional abuse, and I am someone who will fight back. I don't start conflicts, but I have no problem finishing them. I say this to clarify that yes, I knew exactly what I was walking into, and Hank knew what he was asking me to tolerate. This past weekend was the reason I decided to write these posts, because I don't know he's awful, and I need to put it somewhere. In October of 2024, Donald passed away very suddenly. This caused Kevin to spiral emotionally, but those details are for future posts. Kevin and his father had an unbelievably codependent, sometimes violent, and often immature relationship. Donald's passing took a massive chunk of Kevin's life away, not just because he lost a parent, but because he no longer had someone to yell at or with. There was no longer a slob to clean up after. There was no one left to blame for his bad attitude. And there was no longer someone he could elevate to angel status by claiming he took care of him. Long story short, Kevin has been lonely. I recently began fostering cats and kittens. There was an emergency situation at a local shelter where 30 cats needed immediate foster care due to lack of space. I was asked if I could make room for 6 tiny kittens in addition to the 2 sick cats I was already fostering. I decided to ask Kevin if I could use his empty spare room. Aside from simply wanting the room, there was a small part of me trying to remind Kevin that he was still part of the household. I offered 30 free dinners in exchange. He would not need to do anything else. The agreement lasted 6 days before he lost his temper. I don't like talking in the mornings. I don't like noise in the morning. I never have. That's completely a personal thing. My day starts at 7 and I wake up, use the bathroom, and feed my dogs. I then clean the room with the older recovering cats, then set up the feeding station for the kittens. This all happens within 20 minutes of waking up. Kevin immediately started distracting me while I was trying to feed and weigh the kittens, write down individual data, and do my best not to step on one of them. I reminded him that I wasn't annoyed with him, I just didn't want to talk in the mornings. Plus, trying to manage this level of chaos is very difficult for me. He said, "Oh, right, you're not a morning person," and was okay for the first day. The following days, however, he just kept coming at me every few minutes with some thought or random question. Sometimes the thoughts were far too deep to be discussing at 8 a.m., such as, "Hey, quick question, what are your thoughts on Sharia law?" I reminded him that I couldn't have these kinds of discussions in the morning. My brain doesn't function well that early, but more importantly, I'm trying to keep track of tiny kittens so they don't hurt themselves. On the 5th night, I mentioned to Hank that Kevin's ability to leave me alone in the morning was non-existent. That morning, I had to recatch 2 kittens because Kevin distracted me and I forgot to write down their weights. It's hard enough to catch them when they're already excited and running around, let alone trying to keep them still in a bowl while they're in play mode. Unbeknownst to me, Hank spoke to Kevin and reminded him that I cannot function at my usual level in the morning, which means my tolerance for small talk is basically 0. Kevin stewed on this reminder overnight. The following morning, I fed my dogs, cleaned the cat room with the 2 sick cats, and started getting breakfast ready for the kittens. At this point, I had been up for 30 minutes and was balancing the bowls while walking down the stairs to Kevin's level. I knocked and said, "Hello, good morning. Coming in." Kevin gave a vague grunt in response. I opened the door, and the kittens began to get excited inside their pen. I placed the bowls on a shelf, and as I finished unzipping the top of the playpen, Kevin stomped up to the door, and it all began. Kevin stood at the door, arms crossed, face tense. I didn't even look up, I was mid-scoop with kitten food. But he growled, "You know what? Don't even talk to me." I paused. "Okay, no problem," I said calmly, thinking this was just one of his moods and it would pass. But he wasn't done. He went on, "No, seriously, don't speak to me. Don't say good morning. Don't say anything. You're always so rude and condescending. I try to make conversation, and you act like I'm some kind of idiot. You think you're better than me, don't you?" I was stunned. I slowly looked up from the pen, one kitten climbing my leg, and asked, "Is this because I said I didn't want to talk in the mornings?" He shot back, "No, it's because you talk down to me all the time. You never smile. You never say thanks. You act like this house is yours. Guess what? It's not." Now I was getting annoyed. "Kevin, I'm literally fostering these kittens in your extra room with your permission. I thanked you for it. I offered you 30 meals for the inconvenience. You agreed." He raised his voice. "Yeah, and I regret it. You've been awful. You stomp around here like you're in charge. Just admit it, you hate me." I blinked. "What? No, Kevin, I don't hate you. I just asked for some quiet in the mornings because I'm trying to manage tiny, fragile animals. That's it. I'm sorry if that upset you." He wasn't hearing it. "You're manipulative. You're selfish. You act like you're some kind of saint for taking care of cats. Like that makes you better than everyone." At this point, I realized I wasn't going to win this one. I stood up, kitten food still in hand, and said, "Okay, I'll remove the kittens from your room today. Thanks for letting me use it. We won't bother you anymore." He scoffed. "Good. And don't talk to me again." I stayed silent and returned to the kitten room. I cried for a minute while they ate, not because he hurt my feelings exactly, but because the exhaustion of trying to balance compassion, sanity, and Kevin's unpredictable tantrums had finally boiled over. I called the shelter and told them the kittens needed to be moved that day. I spent the next few hours carefully loading the pen, the food, the supplies, and the kittens back into my part of the house. Kevin didn't say another word. He didn't apologize. He didn't even glance at me. Later that evening, Hank asked what had happened. When I told him, he sighed and said, "I'll talk to him." I shook my head. "Don't." He made himself very clear. "I won't speak to him again unless I absolutely have to." Since that day, Kevin has gone back to pretending I don't exist. The difference now is I'm okay with that. Because silence is far easier to deal with than the emotional landmines he plants every time he feels ignored, challenged, or simply uncomfortable. And I've realized something important. I can't fix Kevin. I can't save him. I can't parent him. And I'm done sacrificing my peace for the illusion of family harmony. Story 6. When I started high school, I had this friend I had a lot in common with. At 15 years old, we both were working part-time in retail, after school and on weekends. In my country, if you are a minor, you can work part-time with consent of your legal guardians as soon as you are 15 years old or older, while receiving a much smaller wage than a regular employee. We both came from families where money was tight, so we were glad to contribute. Everybody who worked in retail knows how much one has to endure, so every penny was a hard-earned one. My friend has had this entitled aunt, which was actually her father's half-sister, different mother. This aunt was pestering my friend at her job, constantly asking for discounts and for free designer clothes for her brat. This store sold kid clothes, and very rarely there were designer pieces, but she demanded them anyway. If she wasn't asking for free stuff, she was hovering above my friend and talking to her, making my friend's manager nervous about her, hanging out with family and discussing private matters at work. Luckily, my friend was somehow able to explain it to her manager, and after the aunt had been caught taking clothes out of the racks and throwing on the ground, the ones she didn't like for my friend to tidy up, she was banned from the store. One day, my friend received a phone call from the entitled aunt that the aunt's mother had died. My friend felt sorry for her and offered her her condolences, but the entitled aunt had something else in mind. She said, "Listen, I know you have this fancy job at this designer store. It was not a designer store. I bet you make a lot of money, so I was wondering if you could pay for my mother's funeral." My friend was taken aback by this, but thinking her aunt cannot afford even the most basic funeral, church ceremony, cremation and urn, maybe some flowers, she offered a small amount of money, one that she was saving for summer. Remember, this was not her grandmother by blood, and she has never even met her. It was not much, but could cover at least a decent urn. Her aunt? Are you serious? My mother had many friends. She deserves a proper, big funeral, a nice casket, a good place at the cemetery, and a nice wake at a restaurant. Now this was a very tall order. The funeral she had in mind was more expensive than some weddings, mainly because booking a restaurant and getting a nice spot to rent at a cemetery is a matter of thousands of euros. Nowadays, a good cemetery spot in the city is a real luxury, so most people opt for cremation and a spot in an urn grove at the cemetery. Old people often save up for a nice funeral or have some sort of insurance. The aunt's mother either didn't have any of that, or the aunt just didn't want to use the money for the funeral. My friend, I don't know what to say. I don't have that kind of money. Sure you do. You live at home, you don't have to pay for stuff. I am sure you are keeping all of the money to buy makeup and clothes and things you don't need anyway. This is a matter of principle. How can you be so selfish? I used to babysit you for 3 years after you were born. You owe me this. This was only true to some degree. This aunt really used to babysit my friend. One summer, and she got paid for it. My friend tried to explain she only earns less than minimum wage, and suggested her aunt asked other adults in the family for support. But did she listen? She kept trying to guilt-trip my friend into paying for the funeral, so she could pretend to have a higher social status in front of her acquaintances at the funeral. My friend said she cannot help beyond her means again, and canceled the call. She then called her dad and told him about this crazy stuff, and he couldn't believe the audacity of his stepsister trying to lure money from a 15-year-old. He later found out the entitled aunt was trying to get money from some other relatives too, and only succeeded to some degree. As a revenge, the aunt then called up the manager of my friends, trying to get her fired, claiming she is only 14 years old, forgetting that at 15, we already have our IDs in my country, which we use when we sign a contract with the employer.